First of all, I'd like to express my gratitude to Mr. Belagamba for his kind invitation and hospitable reception. It is great pleasure to be here and participate in your lectures. Unfortunately, my French is not as good as I wish, so I'm going to speak English. Sorry for this. After my presentation, I'm looking for your questions, opinions, and remarks. I would like to have some interaction with you. You are more than welcome to participate in my lecture. Be active and ask questions and make comments, whatever you want. The topic of my presentation is Poland in the European Union between center and periphery, which is La Pologne en Europe, en centre et périphérie. This is very controversial, I suppose, but we can discuss it. We can exchange our views, our experiences. We can challenge this thesis if you want, everything you want. My analysis is devoted to the period of between 2004 and 2011. As you are aware, 2004 is the date of the accession of Poland and the states from Eastern Europe to the European Union. That was a very important date in the history of my country. After long negotiations with the European Union, with European Commission, finally we have become the members of the European Union. And the last date, the day closing the period I've analyzed for you is the 2011, which is the date of the Polish presidency in the Council. You are aware that in European Union we have this special body which takes part in the legislative process, for example, in the European Union, which is the Council, consisting of the ministers of EU member states. And there is a special institution in this body, European body, which is called presidency, yes? And for the first time in history, Poland was in charge of European affairs. This was in 2011. So this was a very important test for our country, our administration, our politicians, and so on. So these two dates are closing the process, the date of analysis of European policy of Poland after the accession to the European Union. Well, we have this picture of geography of Poland. This is the country which is now one of the sixth biggest countries in the European Union. Its population is 38 million of inhabitants, so it is much smaller than France, but still comparing to other European, especially Eastern European states, is rather big, and Poles claim that they have special interest because of the profound history of our country, because of these wars and involvement in European affairs. We have the special mission in Europe, in European Union, because of the size of our country and because of the history. Well, you can analyze our neighbors, the neighbors of Poland. This is one of the most important neighbor is Germany, of course. Germany is the neighbor of France, as you are aware, which is a very important neighbor. And the neighborhood of France and Germany was the cornerstone of European integration, as you are aware. The peace finally came between France and Germany, and European integration was possible after the Second World War. And more or less the same process was if it comes to the relationship between Germany and Poland. Yes, this peaceful process of creating amicable common relations between our countries and in this way creating the way for Poland to the European Union. Another very important neighbor of Poland is Russian Federation. This is on the north, Kaliningrad district. This is the part of Russian Federation. And Russia is, as you are aware, our second greatest neighbor because of our history, because of our wars, our past, and recent developments. You are aware of this tragic catastrophe of Polish president in Smolensk. This was Polish delegation going to Smolensk to commemorate Polish officers killed in Soviet Union in the Second World War by Stalin and communists. This was almost 15,000 people killed by communists, Polish citizens. And Polish president with other profound delegates were on their way to Smolensk, to Katyń, to commemorate this bloodshed, this tragic ethnic cleaning, I suppose. And the catastrophe of the plane happened, which had very big impact on the politics of Poland, especially its European politics, the change of its politics, and the recent developments with the Russian Federation. So, on the south, we have Slovak Republic and Czech Republic. And what is more, very important neighbors are Belarus and Ukraine, because we in Poland have this special concept of policy in our region to create the sphere without the influences of Russian Federation, to be somehow independent from the influences from the Russian Federation, and to make those countries as close to the West as it is possible. That was the policy of Lech Kaczyński, who died in Smolensk. You know the story of Georgia, the war in Georgia in 2008. Lech Kaczyński was there. Georgia was invaded by Russian troops. This was related to the conflict in Abkhazia and South Ossetia. And we supported the sovereignty of Georgia because Polish idea of foreign policy, of Eastern policy, is to make those countries sovereign and independent from the Russia. Because as you are aware, Soviet Union consists of those countries, and after the fall of communism, these countries became free and independent. And our special goal in policy, in European policy, and one of the goals of our presidency was to support these countries, was to make them to explain how important they are for us and for European Union, because in Germany, in France, elites, politicians are not aware, in fact, of the importance of those countries for the geopolitics of this region. So one of our pillars of our European policy, Polish European policy, is to support Belarus, Ukraine, Georgia, and Baltic states are as well in their way to sovereign, independent politics in European affairs without the influence of Russian Federation. Maybe we can discuss later this very important aspect, because I think that France has another goal which is very different from the Polish one. It is somehow directed on the south, on the Mediterranean. And in the European Union nowadays there are disputes between, for example, Poland and France with reference to the trends in the foreign policy of the European Union. How much money should be spent on East and South, for example. France is claiming that South should be supported specially, and Poland claims that the East should be supported with the money from the Brussels. Yes, so there is a dispute between the southern dimension and the eastern dimension in the European Union. Well, my part of my presentation is methodology. Well, it is somehow theoretical, but I will in brief discuss it. In brief discuss it because you are students, members of academic society. So in your works, in your thesis, you are going to use some methodology. I suppose this is, you can take it for granted. Some of you will proceed in academic career, so I suppose this methodological background will be good for you. But Mr. Gamba says that you are on the first year, so just in brief, this methodology. So we have the system of the European Union. European Union creates somehow the system. Yes, another very important aspect is political subjectivity of the EU member states. I will discuss later what the political subjectivity is. But the system of the European Union somehow consists of the center. It has the core of this group, semi-periphery and periphery. So this is somehow divided in cycles, in concentric cycles. This is, as the French call it, avant-garde and the rest of the European Union. And the last one is this one of these paradigms in international relations, in the theory of European integration, liberal intergovernmentalism of Andrew Moravcsik. You may know this name. This is a scientist from United States, and he invented this paradigm of liberal intergovernmentalism, which is the background of my presentation. So, to discuss the system of the European Union, many experts believe that well, we have the process of globalization. You are aware of this term, globalization, very interesting term. And this process of globalization creates interdependencies between states on the economical grounds. Interdependence. One country is dependent on the other on economical grounds, and because of this process of globalization. And this process of globalization reduces somehow the ability to steer in international relations by the state. It diminishes the role of the state in international relations. And European integration, despite of this narrative on the peace between Germany and France, was invented as a tool to maintain control by the state in globalized international relations. So this is the tool of maintaining control by the state on the process of globalization. And by this tool, this European integration, European states takes over the control of on those interdependencies between them. And they wish to shape European integration to improve its position in the international relation. So European Union is somehow the sphere of regulation, The definition of European Union or European integration is the sphere of meta-regulation. This is the concept from philosophy, I think. The sphere of meta-regulation consisting of the subsystems, various subsystems of national and supranational law. You are lawyers, you will be studying international law, European law, and you will find out that in Europe we have many different subsystems of law, national law, European law, and international law. So European integration is this very, very interesting mechanism. And it is an outcome, and this is very important, of legal, cultural, political context of Western European states. It comes from Western European states. Mainly Western European states were in charge after the Second World War of European integration, of creating this mechanism, this law on the supranational level. And that is why this system comes from the Western European states. It is somehow similar to the systems of these Western European states, national systems of these states. And during the process of enlargement, as you are aware, this system, European systems, was somehow stretched on Eastern European states. Eastern European states with their problems, their lack of modernization, had to somehow adjust its internal structures to the process of European integration. And this is, in fact, the core of the problem of center-periphery approach, the peripheral or semi-peripheral position of Poland and other Eastern European states in the European Union. Because for many years, Poland has been developing its internal structures, for example, political, economical, according to different non-Western rationality, communist rationality, the patterns coming from the Soviet Union, because Poland, after the Second World War, was the part of this Warsaw Pact and under the influence of the Soviet Union. And in 1989, finally, we've managed to overcome the communism and introduced liberal democracy and common market. But for many years, we were developing our structures according to different non-Western patterns. And during the process of enlargement, we had to somehow adjust our internal structures to the patterns coming from the Western Europe, coming from the European integration, which was invented by Western European states. These patterns were good, were functional, but not for perhaps for Poland at the stage of its development at the time, because we had to make enormous costs to adjust our internal structures. We have to rebuild our state to make it functional and to make it in the future a viable member of the European Union, functioning in the proper way in the European Union. For example, by implementing European law. You are aware that European law, the part of it consists of the process of implementation. We have EU directives, for example, and they have to be implemented to the national legal systems. The directives are taken in the legislative process in Brussels, with the involvement of the Commission and the European Parliament and the EU member states participating in the Council. Of course, they have different impact on the EU decision-making process because of, for example, the number of votes in the Council. We have still this Nice system. By the way, in Poland, we had a very common statement, Nice or death, if it comes to our politics. Nica o muerte, I suppose. One of our politicians claimed that we have to defend the provisions of Nice Treaty because this is beneficial for Poland and this is beneficial for the whole European Union. Because constitutional, this was in the time the constitutional treaty was drafted in 2004, and we had to defend the regulations of Nice Treaty because they were beneficial for Poland, and we claimed that they will be beneficial for the whole European Union, preventing from the process of collapsing European Union, from the process of marginalization of, for example, Eastern members of these organizations. So Nice is very important in the Polish politics, and this is somehow the way we think of our European politics. But to discuss this methodological background, we have to emphasize that the core of the system, the center of the system is Eurogroup. Is Eurogroup with common currency, because member states participating in Eurogroup hold their meetings before this ECOFIN Council, for example. ECOFIN Council is the Council of EU consisting of the Ministers of Finances and Economy. And Eurogroup has a very big impact on the meetings of this body. It somehow shapes the outcomes of these meetings. So that is why it is very important in political terms to be in Eurogroup, to be in this small cycle of European integration, because Eurogroup shapes economic policy of European Union, and this influence spreads on other EU policies. And unfortunately, Poland is outside Eurogroup, it's outside the Eurozone. So we have to emphasize that the core of European Union is consisting mainly of Western European states, participants to the Eurozone. And despite of this crisis, the crisis is another very interesting case, but despite of this crisis, still the members of the Eurogroup using common currency possess predominant influence on the European politics. And Poland is outside this group, so in this way it is peripheral.
Don't forget to use it.
Okay. I'm still analyzing this methodology. So we have division between center, which is Eurogroup, semi-periphery, and periphery. Semi-periphery, for example, Poland. Poland is semi-periphery. Well, these are the states that joined the European Union in 2004, 2007. So mainly Eastern enlargement. They do not participate in the Eurozone. So they are somehow outside this EU decision-making process. And the very important aspect of this peripheral position in the European Union is lack of, as the economists say, convergence. Convergence, the term convergence. I don't know the French term, but convergence, for example. The very idea of the Eurozone is convergence, economic convergence between the member states. When the convergence is high, the states are similar and the Eurozone functions well. And this convergence is measured by the GDP per capita. You are aware of this measure of economical influence. And in 2004, GDP per capita in Poland was only 50% of the average of the European Union. So it was very small GDP per capita. We are underdeveloped in economical terms. So there is no way to become the member of the Eurozone in the predictable future for Poland because of this lack of real convergence and because of the politics, because the politics around this is another very important aspect. So this lack of real convergence between Poland and Western European states is the factor determining the peripheral position of Poland in the European Union. And somehow Poland becomes the target of Europeization without the influence, without the real influence on the process of Europeization. Because process of Europeization, making Europe common place and very strict organization is the process of creating law, creating regulations. And there is the theory of Europeization, of uploading and downloading, to use this computer terms. Western European states upload their national regulations at European level. So they shape the European level, the supranational level, and they have influence on the process of Europeization. And the states, eastern states, for example, Poland, download regulations from European sphere to its national systems, legal systems. So this is this patronizing Europeizations. We have to be strict with the rules, with the regulations coming to us, to Poland from the European Union, without the possibility to shape them. Of course, we are the members of the Council. We have to theoretically shape this process, but we are weak in economic and political terms, and in fact with no real influence on the European law. And that is why we are the target for the process of Europeization, which is shaped by the Western European states. For example, Germany, for example, France. And the last circle is periphery of European Union. These are non-EU member states outside the European Union, creating this neighborhood policy. For example, Mediterranean states of Northern Africa, or the Turkey, or the Ukraine, or the Belarus. These are the states outside the European Union with no influence, definitely no influence on the process of European Union, without the perspective of joining the European Union, but they have to take the regulations coming from the European Union. They take money but they have to adjust to the norms coming from the European Union. And the last one is liberal intergovernmentalism. This is completely theoretical, so I can skip it and move to my main hypothesis. And because of this insufficient level of political subjectivity, Poland's position in the system of EU is semi-peripheral. Now we can discuss the concept of political subjectivity. So the political subjectivity is the influence, is the basic influence on the EU decision-making process. It is the attribute of the state, allowing the state to shape its internal structures and shape its external environment, and in this way reduce the cost of interactions with its neighbors, for example. This is especially important in globalized international relations. So it is created with this process of uploading and downloading regulations to international environments. And this concept has very much in common with relevance and independence of the state in the international environment. So highly subjective states take over interdependencies between the states by creating common regulations. Because these European integrations are not neutral if it comes to politics. They are shaped for the political purpose of the given states. There is the predominance of national loyalty in the European Union over pan-European interest. This is definitely the case of the European Union, and perhaps one of the factors creating the crisis in these organizations. So European states try to take over interdependencies between them by shaping European law, and in this way gaining political position in the European Union. So there is this game between national and supranational level and competition between the states of the European Union. And of course, I have some additional hypotheses. So European Union redefines the means of realization of this political subjectivity in the international relations. This is no longer the war between the states, the violence. This is somehow negotiations and imposing regulations, using transfer of capital. So somehow this is somehow this is a peaceful process, but still this is the competition between the states, and of course the system of European Union redefines the means of realization of this competition, but still this is the competition. There is no war, there is no military violence, but there is a competition. And another hypotheses are devoted to Poland, and in this pre-accession period, because we had pre-accession period, Poland before 2004, we had negotiations with the European Commission, with Western European states to become the members of the European Union. And in this process, we had to implement European regulations without the possibility to shape them, because they were already created. They were already created by the Western European states, by the France, by the Germany, by France, and we had to just adjust our internal structures without the possibility to shape them and make costs of these adjustments. So this was one-sided, asymmetrical process. This negotiations between Poland and Western Europe to become the member of the European Union, and this was the factor decreasing our subjectivity, our influence on European affairs after 2004. And in the pre-accession period, the position of Poland in comparison to the European Union was characterized by the differences in potentials. We were a poor country with low level of GDP. We had small potential, economic potential with relation to the European Union. And that is why even the least favorable conditions, because you are aware that we were negotiations our conditions, but to become the member of the European Union. But in fact, this process is connected with negotiation dossiers, derogations in particular dossiers. So we had to amend, we had to implement the whole acquis communautaire, as the French call it, the whole European law shaped at the earlier stage of the European integration by Western European states. So we had to adjust to this acquis communautaire without the possibility to shape it. And even the least favorable conditions, which were first of all shaped by the Western European states, would be less costly for Poland than not becoming the member of the European Union at all. So we had no choice. We had to become the member of the European Union, because otherwise we would be today like Belarus or Moldova or something like this. So we had no choice. There was asymmetry between Poland and the European Union. And yes, we had to adjust to the European Union. And these unsatisfactory conditions of membership in several dossiers have been factors decreasing our political subjectivity in the European Union after 2004. For example, we had very big troubles in implementing the acquis related to environment and climate protection. That is why the energy policy of Poland in the European Union is very viable for us, very important for us. We are not adjust to the standards of energy policy and environment in the European Union, and we had to make additional costs to implement this European acquis in this area. And of course, Poland was acting to improve its political position in the European Union after 2004, but we had some problems. For example, very important problem was connected with the system of coordination of our European politics. As you know, Poland is a republic. We have president who is in charge of foreign policy, with the prime minister, who is another very important element of our executive. And European Union is legitimized by the executives of the EU member states. This legitimation, political legitimation, comes from the executives. We have two institutions responsible for executive in Poland: president and prime minister and government. And there was a dispute, especially during the period of Lech Kaczyński tenure of office, the dispute between Lech Kaczyński and Donald Tusk, the prime minister of Poland. Dispute concerning the European politics. Dispute about who is in charge of representing Poland in Brussels, for example. We had some problems with aeroplane, who can fly to Brussels to represent Poland, prime minister or president. It was very harmful for Polish presence in European Union. So this was this major malfunction of Polish coordination of European affairs that decreased our political influence on the European Union. And in several dossiers, in several areas of European integrations, we had problems as well. For example, in the process of the treaty reforms, in external relations, in economic policy, and in justice and home affairs, because you are aware that European integration consists of various areas. Internal areas, security, for example, and economics, and external. And we had some problems, and our presidency did not manage to overcome these problems because of this substantial change in the architecture of the European Union caused by the Treaty of Lisbon, the trio presidency, decreasing the role of the presidency in the institutional architecture of the European Union by the Treaty of Lisbon. So verification of this hypothesis. We had regulations from the pre-accession period regulating our coordination with European Union. Our process of coordination was not flexible and efficient. It was centralized somehow and bureaucratic. And there was lack of strategic planning in Polish politics with reference to European affairs that caused substantial problems. And competence disputes, I've already discussed it, this dispute between our Prime Minister and our President on this, our presence in European politics. And in the pre-accession period, differences in potentials between Poland and the Western European states. Lack of alternative. The process of joining the European Union had no alternative, and that is why we were the junior partner of the European Union in negotiations. And there was the asymmetry between Poland and the European Union. Functioning outside the system. Implementation of acquis without the participation of created without the participation of candidate. And conditions of Polish accessions were determined to the large extent by the Western states from the center, by Germany, by France. These were the countries shaping our conditions of participation in the European Union. And of course, very important aspect, number of derogations, because each country is obliged to implement full acquis communautaire. But this is impossible from the very first day of accession, from 2004. And the idea of negotiations between the candidate and the European Union is to negotiate derogations, this time to adjust its internal structures. And Poland had a number of derogations, many derogations with the European Union, especially with environment, with internal security, and this was the factor causing dysfunctionality of Poland in the European Union after 2004. Well, very pessimistic approach, but Poland in the process, I will discuss it during my next seminar on Thursday. The treaty reforms from the Nice through constitutional treaty and discussing at the end Lisbon Treaty. So there is a permanent character of the treaty reforms in the European Union, and the political position of the Western European states rests on the factor that they are shaping these treaty reforms from the very beginning of the process of European integration. This is not the case with Poland joining the European Union in 2004, so after the Nice Treaty was drafted. So yes, generally speaking, Poland was underrepresented in the process, for example, of creating a constitutional treaty because of this functioning of European Convention. European Conventions with Valéry Giscard d'Estaing. This was the institution that was intended to give democratic legitimation to the European Union, but in fact it reduced the influence of Eastern European states. It was not democratic at all, and it had impact on the Intergovernmental Conference of 2003-2004 and on the drafting of Lisbon Treaty after 2007. Poland in the external relations, just brief discussion on it. So,
Restez bien concentré. Hein. Je sais que c'est difficile, mais c'est très intéressant et essayez de bien percevoir les hypothèses principales qu'ils donnent. Restez bien, s'il vous plaît, concentré sur ces propos.
So, discussing this, we have to say that this dispute between European Union and United States was the catalyst for the position of Poland in the European Union. For example, Jacques Chirac was against of Polish policy towards Iraq, as you know, and was criticizing Poland for its politics, its close politics with the United States on Iraq, and somehow there was the dispute between Germany and France and Poland because of Iraq issue, and the special role of United States as the guarantee of the security for Poland, because we perceive, and this is another very important factor if it comes to our politics, that United States can give us guarantee of our security in relations to Russia, for example, because this is the power, military power, yes, and there was the dispute. And the disputes with Russia and limited impact on the process of enlargement, and in fact limited impact on the neighborhood policy. Of course, we have this special project, Eastern Partnership with Sweden, which is another very interesting project in the European Union, but it is not as good as Union for Mediterranean, the project of Monsieur Sarkozy. And that is why there is asymmetry between these dimensions of European Union, southern and eastern dimension. You have Union for Mediterranean, which is part of the process from Barcelona, and it is much more developed in comparison to the Eastern Partnership, the project of Poland and Sweden, which is devoted to Eastern Partnership of the European Union, Ukraine, Belarus, and Georgia, for example. And the core of the problem, which is the lack of the participation in the Eurozone, lack of real convergence, crucial decisive factor of Polish semi-peripheral position in the European Union. And the Justice and Home Affairs, lack of real impact on these regulations, just adapting the regulations without the possibility to shape them. This is the area shaped particularly by the France, for example, immigration policy. France is very interested to upload its national immigrational policy to European level. Poland has almost any immigration policy. This immigration policy of Poland is shaped mainly by the patterns coming from the European Union. And this is a very important country if it comes to immigration, because we have the border with non-European states. We have very long border, and there was the huge problem of becoming the member of Schengen area for Poland. We had to adjust, we had to improve our border with Ukraine, with Belarus, with Russia. Western states, France was criticizing us during this process and was not in favor of becoming the member of Schengen by Poland. I will develop this during the course on Thursday. We'll discuss the Prim Treaty, the G6 initiative within the European Union, the statement of Monsieur Sarkozy, then the Minister for Internal Affairs at 2000, I don't know, he was criticizing Poland. He did not want Poland in the G6. So maybe we can discuss this very interesting problem. And the Polish presidency, the impact was reduced because of this change caused by the Treaty of Lisbon. Treaty of Lisbon reducing the role of the institution of presidency in the architecture of the European Union. So we have to admit that because of the insufficient level of political subjectivity, Polish position in the European Union is semi-peripheral, which is very pessimistic, but you can challenge this. You can challenge this, you can discuss it. I'm open for the discussion. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm looking for your comments.